Though we die, we will live. Though death has covered our world, life will cover it again. For Jesus' crucifixion led to resurrection, so all who join him in his death will join his exaltation. In the end, life will conquer death. This is the truth revealed in Revelation. For spreading life has always been humanity's vocation. In the beginning, in the Garden of Eden, God created humans to conquer and have dominion. He created them to rule with him like kings in his kingdom. He gave them life in their blood. He put flesh on his image so that they could partner with him like priests who could spread the life of his garden to every inch of creation. But a dragon, the serpent, the Satan, wanted to spread death. He wanted to bring uncreation. He sought to rule the rulers, to reign over those chosen to reign, to stop God's priests from spreading God's domain. So instead of spreading life as God's image clothed in blood and flesh, that beast, Satan, shed the blood of image bearers in an attempt to cover the world with death. It seemed the serpent's work was accomplished, for in his conquest of God's first rulers and their descendants, the dragon added to his alliances two strategic accomplices. Satan called forth two spiritual beasts, Babylon and the harlot, his own king and priest. The spirit of his king was Babylon, who ruled through governments and nations. Babylon used the power and bloodshed of the state to spread uncreation. The spirit of his priest was the harlot, who used twisted imitations of religion to seduce priestly humans away from their life-spreading vocation. The harlot was the priestess to Babylon's kings, weaponizing even the purest religion to entice empires to become all the more bloodthirsty. This unholy trinity of Satan, the nations, and twisted religiosity became drunk on the power they gained through shedding the blood of God's kings and priests. But in a vision, in a revelation, God showed a man named Daniel a scroll that held all the names of the priests and kings the unholy trinity would hand over to death. But God tells Daniel, these are the very names of the ones he will one day resurrect. Those written in this scroll of life will be crowned as kings after they die, when, like priests, they use blood to cleanse death and purify. But the scroll was sealed until one would arise. One who was worthy to open the scroll, one who would read the names of those he would make alive. Centuries later, against the church, the unholy trinity took its toll. Name after name was handed over to death as Christians wondered when the scroll of life would unfold. They believed Jesus had defeated the harlot, Babylon, and Satan. They faithfully followed him through death and tribulation, but they needed encouragement. They needed vision. They needed revelation. So God spoke to a partner in their tribulation, a political prisoner on the island of Patmos, the latest victim of Babylon. In a vision, Jesus revealed the truth to an eyewitness named John. John saw Jesus reigning in heaven. The harlot and Babylon had shed his blood. The dragon did slay him. But here Jesus was, ruling on the highest throne, above the beasts and Satan. His blood didn't mean death. Somehow, it meant new creation. John saw that crucifixion led to exaltation. This is the truth Jesus wants to reveal. This is the message of Revelation. Jesus told John to write down what he would show him and send it as letters to the 7 churches. For like the 7 days in which God made Eden, the churches would be priests of God's new creation. The letter of Revelation would pull the curtain of history back. It would reveal to them how their life, their blood, would conquer the harlot, Babylon, and Satan. Revelation was written to encourage them that though the reigns of the beast and the serpent may seem inevitably certain, they will defeat their power through persecution, for they will join Jesus in resurrection. This was a revelation the church desperately needed, for many were being martyred. Many were bravely bearing witness. Many were shedding their blood by the hands of the harlot and her corrupted religion. They were dying for their conviction that Jesus defeated death with his life. So, in joining with him, they believed they would find exaltation through execution. For in his revelation, John saw that the blood of the slain is never shed in vain. For John saw 7 bowls, like the 7 days in which God made Eden. These 7 bowls would be filled with the blood of martyrdom, and their blood would be spilled to cover the world in new creation. Their blood would be a witness against Satan and his minions. And many would suffer under their persecution. Death after death, the unholy trinity provided plenty of blood to cover the world. The harlot hunted faithful priests. Babylon conquered rival kings as Satan's uncreation continued to unfurl. The harlot and the beast would drink their fill of blood, as twisted religion and the sword of the state made witness after witness fall to the power of the snake. The more the beasts raged, the more Satan reigned. The more this unholy trinity got drunk on the blood of the saints. Name after name of those written in the scroll of life were handed over to death as kings and priests were sentenced to die. In response to all this death, in response to all their pain, John wept, for no one was worthy to open the scroll and speak life out of the grave. For 7 seals closed the list of names that, when spoken, would finally be raised. But Jesus answered John's cries for the saints, for he is worthy to open the seals and speak the names. For he is the Lamb who by the unholy trinity was slain, yet rose from the dead, and over death now reigns. Jesus would open the 7 seals like the 7 days in which he made Eden. Jesus would speak resurrection. Jesus would usher in new creation. Yet, as Jesus opened the first 4 of the 7 seals, John saw death continue to conquer and kill. More names on the scroll died by Babylon's weapons of war. More and more saints perished as the harlot wielded religion and sword. Martyr upon martyr suffered under injustice and hate. Christian after Christian were killed by the harlot's corruption and the Babylonian state. Then, with the 5th, came the cries of the slain, the shouts of the martyrs who had gone to the grave. How long, they cried, would these beasts keep their reign? How long before death is killed and life is raised? Then John saw the answer come after the 6th seal was opened, for he saw what the multitude of martyrs were clothed in. They were dressed in white, for that's what priests were robed in. And like priests, they would cover death with the lifeblood they were soaked in. They would defeat the harlot, Babylon, and Satan with the blood of the Lamb and the testimony of their own martyrdom. Then the 7th seal was broken, and as it was done, before kingly decrees were read and opened, John saw 7 trumpets held by 7 angels ready to blow them, and as they blew, their sound shook the earth below them. These trumpet blasts are meant to be a warning to those still serving Babylon and the harlot that the true king is coming. For every disaster and every plague, every life that succumbs to death and the grave is a sign that Babylon's kingdoms will shake, that the harlot's power will break. For God will listen to the prayers of his martyred saints and put a final end to Satan, that ancient snake. In fact, God will not only listen to the prayers of the slain, but will use the blood they spilled to conquer Satan's reign. For the 7 bowls filled with the prayers and life of the martyrs would be delivered back to the very monsters by whom they were martyred. For the beasts thought they were covering the earth with death as they trampled upon life, but really, God was the one pressing his saints to make their lives into an intoxicating wine. And this wine, this cup, these bowls of blood would make the beasts deathly drunk. For the martyrs' blood spilled by the empires of Babylon the Violent and the corrupt religion of the harlot extracted a draught of life so potent that all their death could not stomach it. Life swallows the beasts whole, for death cannot survive the life poured out from the martyr's bowl. This is the revelation John was shown in Jesus' own death and blood. For the harlot of religion came for him. Babylon in the Romans brought him to crucifixion. And all of this devastation was orchestrated by the death-wielding dragon, Satan. Death tried to swallow his life. The beasts used all their power to hold him. But in his resurrection, Jesus' life would overthrow them. For the blood of Jesus was a life that not even the ancient serpent could devour. For in drinking the life of Jesus, Satan lost his power. The life of Jesus and his martyrs bring death's defeat, and the blood they spill clean the world like priests. For as their blood covered the kingdoms of Babylon the Violent and the temples of the corrupted harlot, The priests of Jesus covered death with life run scarlet. So through the 7 bowls, like the 7 days of creation, God would clean our earth of death and remake the Garden of Eden. He will make earth the new home for heaven. And that is what John saw as the culmination of his revelation. He saw Jesus reading the scroll of life, reading the names of those long-awaiting salvation. He saw Jesus speaking life to those he had sealed for resurrection. He saw God's home of life moving into man's habitation. He saw God and man together again in the new and final Eden. For death and its wielder, Satan, would be no more. Neither would there be any tears, sadness, or pain. For the King of life would make his home with us, and the grave by the slain would be slain. This was John's revelation, and it's meant for us today, that we might know that no matter the persecution or death we face, it is Jesus, the King of life, who truly reigns. In the end, life will conquer death. This is why Jesus gave us his revelation.